For this session, as I mentioned, we are going to delve into the book world, writing, market, platform. I invite Swati Daftuar on stage to moderate. She's already on stage. I welcome you, Swati, on stage, as well as our speakers, Ambar Chatterjee, Mary Therese Kurkalang, Melkior, Sangma, Naveen, Kishore, and Senthil Kumar. Swati Daftuar is a deputy editor with The Hindu and covers literature and publishing. In her previous role as executive editor, fiction at HarperCollins India, she published fiction and non-fiction books across various genres from romances, thrillers, and mysteries to sci-fi, speculative and mythological fiction. She is particularly interested in finding new voices and styles that push the envelope and experiment with what fiction can be and do. Swati has also worked with BuzzFeed India as their essays editor and started her career as a feature writer for The Hindu. I now hand over the session to you, Swati.
Thank you. Okay. I've got it here. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I think I'll begin with a brief introduction of all the panelists, and then we'll talk a little bit about what the session aims to do before we open up to questions. Let's start with Naveen Kishore. Naveen Kishore is a theatre lighting designer, a photographer, filmmaker, poet, and the founder and publisher of Seagull Books. Kishore has had his poems published in numerous national and international platforms. Knotted Grief, a collection of his poems, was published in 2021. He has recently published his second book of poems, Mother Muse, Quintet. Kishore lives and works in Calcutta, India. We'll now move on to Melkior Sangma. Melkior Sangma holds an MA in English from NEHU and has a keen interest in Garo literature and folklore. He has been the editor and publisher of Chimik, a Garo magazine since 2002. Melkior is also the editor and publisher of Jarongpang magazine and Ho Ho Photo Mag since 2018. He's the convener of Folk Music Committee under the 100 Drums Wangala Festival Committee. Melkior organizes training workshops on Garo traditional musical instruments, including the traditional drum. Yeah. We've got Ambar here next to me. Ambar Sahil Chatterjee has worked in publishing for the last 14 years. He's currently a literary agent with a suitable agency. Previously, he was a senior commissioning editor with Penguin Random House India, where he looked after the prestigious Penguin Classics list, while also acquiring and publishing contemporary fiction. He has worked closely with a range of writers and translators, including, among others, Daisy Rockwell, Fatima Bhutto, Anis Salim, and K.R. Meera. And we've got Senthil Kumar. Senthil is an avid reader turned publisher. After close to 40 years in marketing, IT recruitment, and business, he has turned to his first love, books. Senthil is a founder partner of Vishnupuram Publications, which is bringing out writer Jay Mohan's retelling of Mahabharata called Venumurasu? White Drum. And at around 250,000 pages and 26 volumes, probably the world's longest novel. I think it is the worst now, yes. And then we've got Mary. Mary Therese Kurkalang, the director of the Shillong Literary Festival since its first edition in 2021. She has been working across art, culture, publishing, and the social sector since 1995. Born in Shillong, she shifted to Delhi, where she was based for over 2 decades, working in international cultural centers, publishing houses, non-profits, and an international book fair. Since 2012, she has focused her work in the Northeast region in India. So that's all our panelists. While I was reading the bios, I think all of us could see that we all belong to the literary world, but we all have different spaces that we occupy in it. You know, we've got literary magazines, independent publishers. We've got a festival curator. We've got an agent. So what I think we're looking at here is the session's called the book world. And I think the interesting thing is, we can actually look at it as an actual world with different spaces, different aspects, and we're perfectly placed here to kind of get a sense, a perspective of the landscape of that world. So I think the first thing I want to ask all our panelists is, when we're talking about books and we're talking about reading, I think the one thing that comes out that all of us would have to engage in and all of us will have to kind of pay attention to is the reader or the consumer, is who is at the other end of what you're doing in your landscape. And all of us have had to kind of critically engage with and think about who we are writing for, who we are publishing for, who we are creating these festivals for. So I'd love all your perspectives on how you look at and how you interpret that reader when in the space that you occupy today. Maybe I think we can start with Mary and move on to Naveen, because I know that we'll get an interesting perspective down the road from here. So Mary, maybe we can start with you.
Thank you, Swati. I think in this case I'll be very specific about curating literary events. And I think that that is so contextual to the place. Because who am I doing this for, you know? So even the Shillong Literary Festival for me is a constant learning. But having done literary festivals in most parts of India and internationally, I realized this, that, you know, what I do in Delhi cannot be superimposed and done here. I have to do it differently here, because yes, the audiences are the heart of all of it. We want to engage both ways, because it actually wouldn't work both ways if I just like brought in an author who perhaps whose writing is not very known or comes from a space where, you know, it doesn't resonate as much in this city. So I've had to think very carefully when curating this festival. Also in terms of, you know, I think a couple of people have looked at the program this year and the last 2 years and say, they use this word a lot, eclectic. Because it is not a program that is simply steeped in, like, you know, an author comes in and we're having a reading like we do book conversations in most literary festivals. But here what I've had to do is also to consider the history of my state, this city. You know, a lot of our communities here come from oral literatures, oral storytellings, and therefore where the ways that we tell stories are not often only in the written word, but in the ways that we live, in the ways that we farm, the ways that we eat. So that is why my program here as well is like trying to include all of it. And at the heart of it is also that, you know, I'm really wanting to speak to the children and the youth. So I have to think about, you know, what will interest them immediately, but what could also perhaps plant a seed. So, you know, on the one hand, I'll bring in something really popular that everyone will resonate with, but also something perhaps that is not necessarily popular, but there could be a seed planted there. So these are some of the ways that I'm thinking, and, you know, it's always a learning exercise. I think it's both ways and every way, the way one curates, and it's not only me, but always in consultation with so many. And I think curation is also really important to listen. And not just in terms of like speaking to people and hear what they're responding to me, but to really like listen in terms of like understanding, you know, like in this entire state, there is not a single trade bookshop. What does that tell me about my state in terms of like where do people access books? And then I look at which are the schools that have really well-equipped living libraries, which means that it's not just a cupboard of books that is locked away, but actually where there is an actual culture of reading in schools, in homes. And so these are things, the other ways in which I looked at it. So it has to also be that I have to really engage, like engagedly research and understand and go out to understand then what I do in this, you know, 3 days at this festival or 2 days.
We talked about the fact that, you know, there are readers you're looking at, and maybe the creation of readers becomes an important aspect also to look at then. Senthil, maybe you could talk about, because, you know, you're also part of a very big festival, a literary festival. If you could talk about both aspects of it, of what you're publishing, but also the reader that you're thinking about.
Thank you, Swati. Hello, folks. Um I'm in a happy space, yeah, in the way that I started out as a reader, then I became a publisher because I liked what I read. Then for the past 13 years, we have curated India's largest independent lit fest. For 10 of those years, I've curated that. So in all three aspects, I've dabbled in all three. So, if you ask an author, in my opinion, I mean, we are a one author publishing firm as of now, Jay Mohan. His son has also published, another author has published, and, I mean, two more have published. And we have huge plans for, the Tamil literary space. We want to go places. So, that's for later. If you ask an author, and many of them declare it in the writing itself, then I write for myself, not for the reader. It's for the reader to find out. That's fine, but that doesn't sell. That doesn't make money. To me, as a publisher, if the author writes for himself or herself, it is our duty to find the readers. Okay, and I do it in two ways. One, graduate the readers that already exist, but who stick to pulp, who stick to popular reading, to higher literature, because we publish only higher lit. So we try to graduate those people into that space, and we also try to create new readers, okay, in two ways. One, we conduct a lot of workshops with authors on how to read or how to write and how to assess what you've written. The experienced authors come in and pitch, and then it's kind of a friendly interaction at least 6 or 7 times a year, and these guys actually land up in our literary festival, become part of it, they keep coming, okay, and then they graduate higher on, and they either write. Now, as an offshoot of our festival, I think there are about 8 literary movements across Tamil Nadu. They conduct, monthly meetings and invite people. They conduct seminars and all that. Those are all offshoots of what we have done as a mother organization. We are very proud of it, and I'm happy to be here so that we can share that space and experience with the rest of the publishing industry, which is nationwide. We are vernacular and very limited, but we will get there.
Sorry, I keep switching this off. One of the things that that interests me is that the role of the agent, Amber. In this case, what happens is you're thinking of the author. You're speaking, you're speaking for the author. You're kind of working. You're advocating for the author, but you have to be very very tuned in or very plugged in into the reader to know what kind of books to bring on, to know what the world is reading, what the public is reading, and then to also create that demand, to maybe bring new readers into the fray. So can you talk a little bit about how that works for an agent? What kind of, are you looking at what's already selling? Are you also looking at what you would like to maybe make work, maybe create a space or create or fill a gap, all of those things? How does the reader feature in the decisions that an agent takes today in India, especially for the English language publishing industry?
Thank you, Swati. No, you're absolutely right in the sense that the work I do as an agent invariably involves thinking about who the reader is. But having worked as an editor for so long, I'm also very well aware that there are limitations to fully visualizing that reader, because it's such a subjective thing. What one can do is one can fall back on one's own instincts as a reader, because I feel we all come into the book world, we all come into publishing because books impacted us in the first place, and books impacted us as readers. So our own readerly instincts, I think, that is something we should not ignore. And of course, there are pragmatic aspects to it as well, in terms of what publishers seem to be looking for, what they're not looking for so much, what the demand is there for. So it has to be taken in conjunction with lots of other things. It's not just one thing. And like I said, there are practical concerns. But going back to my instincts as a reader, if we receive a submission, let's say in a genre that doesn't seem to have too much demand statistically from what publishers might likely seek out, but yet if it moves me or inspires me or excites me in some way, I feel I have more reason to champion that and to advocate on behalf of that book, that writer. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. I think here I'd like, Naveen, if you could talk a little bit about, we talked about the the market and the concerns and the pragmatic aspects of what to publish. But the work that Siegel has been doing, I want you to comment a little bit about the decisions of what to publish and what goes behind it. What kind of, questions and answers and the conversations that go behind the kind of work that Siegel does today. And how much does the reader kind of come into the play, when you're thinking of the decisions that you're taking?
Yeah, sure, I'll try. I think first of all, publishing is a place of hope, as is the act of reading, in the sense that as a reader, you hope that what you pick up is going to resonate. It's like in my darkest times when I was a college student, I turned to translated literature, which happened to be mostly European. And nobody was to realize that many decades later, when I was trying to play first world publisher with third world money, I chose to turn to European literature and start to translate it, right? And so when I talk of hope, it's not just a romantic notion, it is how you approach each piece of writing, thought, fiction, poetry. And all of us as agents, as curators, as publishers of magazines, are looking for that ultimate wonderful thing. And I agree with Amber about the fact that that initial point of contact and resonance and something that touches you, like last evening's program, it's not something you can create out of target audiences, Excel sheets, all of those wonderful things that also happen. There is a space for those. But for the kind of high-end literature that translation brings to light, I think the initial core reading is this, whoever is publishing. And in the Siegel case, it's half a dozen of us. That's one side of it. The other side of it is we decided very early in our lives, almost 18 years ago, that the American English-speaking Western world expects Indian publishers to stay within their boundaries, to buy from them to publish here, whereas they could cherry pick from our lists and take our Satyajit Ray's and Amrinal Sen's and Habib Tanvir's and do what in publishing terms is called world rights. So we decided, what does an independent publisher ultimately have? They have this lovely, arrogant chip on their shoulder about how wonderful they are, without in any way screaming from the rooftops about it. So we said, our money's as good as everybody else's. You guys told us we're a globalized world. We do such lovely books. We edit them well. What we lack is reasonably courteous distribution. This is very important for the author to be visible. Visibility is different from buying and selling. Your first act is visible, make it visible. Then you come as readers with your hope. If 6 people liked it, 60, 600, 6,000, it becomes a success story for a certain kind of publishing. So we set up something called Siegel Books London Limited, and we decided we would only buy world rights. And this experiment is 600 books old. We are distributed into the world by the University of Chicago Press. It's commerce with a ceiling. It doesn't make large sums of money. It creates a world of cash flow, right? And the role of the publisher, in fact, the new literary agent probably started life in some incarnated way as a publisher, because a publisher is a literary agent. What is the role of the literary agent? To invent, reinvent, keep alive the author, reinvent them as audiobooks, as e-books, as paperbacks, as graphic novels, all of which old-fashioned publishers used to do. So it's an interesting thing that it's taken on a new form and shape. Now I'll shut up.
No, you talked about the, that idea of the role of the publisher, the role of the agent. And one of the things that I want to talk about is, Melkior, if you could talk about the role of the literary magazine, because we're talking about a world where magazines as a general rule are the distribution, the circulation is on the decline. Finding a space for that magazine, finding a readership is very difficult. How does your magazine, one, if you could talk a little bit about the origin story of the magazine, how did it begin, and also what kind of obstacles, what kind of challenges, and then also what kind of triumphs have you faced while publishing this magazine?
Thank you. Sorry, I have a running noise and my voice is out of tune. So let me tell you the story of my magazine very fast. It is confined to Meghalaya only, though we have readers in all parts of the world, but it is basically confined to Meghalaya. So we started our magazine in the year 2002 with the twin objective of giving, boosting the reading culture of the Garos and giving platform to the writers. We were successful. That was 2 years before mobile phones came to Tura, and I think 10 years before smartphone came to Tura. Because smartphones and this thing, why I'm telling you this is important. That's right. So what we write in our magazine, we primarily focus on Garo literature, Garo culture, Garo history, and things like that. But one of the big challenges we write in our magazine is also writing some difficult topics in layman's language, so we can give information to them. So since 2002, for about 10 years, we wrote our magazine. It was an instant hit. There are many readers. We circulate for people less than, I think Garo Hills population less than 10 lakhs. We circulated between 4,000 and 10,000 copies. And after that, smartphones came. Then around 2015, I stopped for a while. I was learning different things, music and other things. And after that, then I found I'm not saying about my magazines, people started losing interest in reading books and magazines. And only just yesterday I went to the bookstores in Shillong also. It is also just like in Garo Hills also. Very few books, very few magazines. And I think people are no more reading printed books like that. So people told me that I should write a magazine again and face the challenge of internet. And I thought I should write again. Then I resumed writing my magazine this year again. And I know why people are no more reading printed books. I think there are many reasons why people read books, right, sir? Some to get knowledge, some to, and one of those things to amuse themselves. So we started writing again this magazine, and we are using the internet itself, the enemy of printed books, to spread how we are printing books and what kind of knowledge we are giving through books. One of the things I'm wondering is now people are not reading printed books. They have access to unlimited information in the internet. So I was wondering, does that mean people of today's generation have more knowledge or are more enlightened than the people of the previous generation without internet? This is my question.
I think you've kind of led it to the next. I was thinking about this, like we've been talking about the threat to the reading world by the existence and advent of social media and internet, right? We are all reading on our phones. If we're reading short format. We are consuming so much information, like you said. Does that make us better readers, better informed, or does it just, what does it do to the reader? Because I think what I would say to that question is, I think we are still readers. I think we're all still readers. I don't know if reading the printed word versus reading the digital screen has changed the idea of reading. I think human beings will always remain readers.
Yes.
But how we read and how we bring in more readers to the fold was actually my next question. I don't think we need to talk about whether whether there are less readers in the world, because I think year by year, I think more readers are coming into the fold. But how do we make them interested in the book? How do we make them interested in reading the printed word? Do we approach them via social media? Do we approach them via the things that appeal to them, the book talk generation? Or do we look at making reading into a more serious activity? So I think my question, and it's open to all of you, is how do we bring new readers into the book world? Because readers don't necessarily have to be part of the book world. They can be readers who are doing a different kind of reading. But how do you change, how do you convert these readers to book readers, to understanding the book world? Any of you would like to?
Yeah. The mic stopped working as soon as my wife came to the front row. But let me try my best. Let me quote a few facts, and then we can get into the essence of it. Tamil Nadu has been a forerunner in the Library Act. It was Chennai Library Act in 1961 or something. Then it became Tamil Nadu Library Act. And Tamil Nadu is one of the few states where about 6% of the property tax is utilized for nurturing libraries. We've got a huge set of, it's a robust organization. Like any organization, whether it's government or private, when it becomes bigger, there are people who run it for their own interest, but that apart, it's a very robust organization. Secondly, the government, as of last year, started an initiative wherein every single district headquarters now has a book exhibition. Okay, just imagine that, about 36 districts, and then every one has a book exhibition which is about a week long. Chennai's is 14 days long. Chennai also now has an international book fair connect. Okay, so this is one way in which the government helps out. We have to now grow out of this and then collect that crop of people who make that rounds to those book exhibitions and then bring them into the content that we do. That's the second part. So if you ask me in one word, how do we make more people get in? It's by being visible. Okay, whether it is social media, TVs, or we dance in the streets, let's do anything, just get people in. The more people come in, then they can become picky and choosy and on what they want to read. The need of the hour now is to get more people in, away from the video games, away from the malls, okay, and into the world of books. So do whatever we need to do, and then let's hope for the best.
One thing, in my case, it is different because if you are writing English, it is different because I'm writing only the Garo. It is different, very much different. Market is different. Suppose one thing I have experienced is if we put these magazines in the bookstores, very few people go to take them. But if I distribute them to colleges, schools, and localities, everybody buys them. But very few people are going to the bookstores now. People are still reading those books. I mean, my magazines, but they no more buy it from the bookstores. They rarely visit bookstores. We use social medias also to advertise our magazines also. If they see it in a social media also, they go to the stores to buy it. That means I think they're still interested in it, but they're no more looking for it from the bookstores. I don't know how to explain that.
I think what it is also what I think, Naveen, you said about distribution, right? In every way, visibility, whether it is knowing about a magazine, knowing about a festival, all of it kind of depends and comes down to visibility. And how do you make books more visible? How do you get people? Because once it's visible, your readers will come, your consumers will come. And is that also, so we talked about the vernacular and the regional festivals, but is that also part of India's role in the global platform, in the global literary scene? How has it changed over time? Naveen, would you like to comment on how have we become more visible? Are we more out there now? Because once upon a time we were almost not there. So how has that changed? And yeah,
I think there's two sides to it. One is that yes, automatically between, let us say, 1982 and now, when I started publishing, you're more of a global, visible being, but you're still not somebody else's passion. So when you have a Frankfurt Book Fair in 1986, and you have India as the country of honor. And then in 2006, 20 years later, you have India again. Nothing changes. The Germans, the French, the Italians, nobody's rushing around doing anything. You can literally count them in one hand, the odd Bengali translation or Malayalam or it's not just Mahashwata and Perumal Murugan. I mean, there's so much happening here which should be translated and made available. I think the focus has to be on the doing and persisting, and the faith that the market also has a duty. We keep talking about marketing the other way. But you guys have a duty to find through your own, and it's again sounding a bit mushy here, but it's worked. It took us 30 years to be discovered in the nicest possible way in a world. That's important for me. I refuse to publish for some boundary. It's important that you publish like anybody else, because literature is about the human condition. So something in a small town in Germany can resonate somewhere in Shillong also, because the women in both stories have the similar problems. So I think the idea is to keep doing and testing readership, not just giving them like TV programs for TRP the same formula of success. You can do that too, and very successfully, because you can replicate, clone a successful novel. Publishers can brief their wonderful authors. We have a lot of wonderful authors we all grew up reading in, writing in the English language, all of whom are now doing, I'm sorry to say, a certain kind of publisher's brief. But they're such wonderful stylists, so you still get attracted to them, but it's a tricky one. But I think a lot of India is happening in the languages and the vernacular. It's not happening necessarily in the English language. So we have to find those many Indias and make them. Our role is of midwifery and conduit. We are not really supposed to make everything one big success. At the Seagull level, we do 50 books a year. 3 of them fund the other 47 because the 3 get reprinted for some reason. We never know who. We don't know who's going to review them. We try, you try everything. Which truth of a particular book will resonate with who and become a success anywhere in the world? And the world is important. It's not just localized.
In fact, this idea of trying, of replicating the existing successes versus kind of going out and looking for something new. I think, Ambar, I'd like you to maybe comment on that aspect, because one of the things that as an agent you'd be seeing are the different kinds of stories people are writing, the different kind of books, the subjects, how they've evolved over time, and both, like Naveen said about the demands of the publisher and the demands of the readers, and then the space to create something new. Could you talk about how that has changed over time?
So to be honest, there always is a tendency to go in for a particular kind of trend that's developing, and there's always a danger to that, because just because something is trendy right now, just because it's hot right now, doesn't mean it'll actually sustain itself over a long period of time. So to simply dish out the same formula again and again and again is actually, it'll not help the cause of reading, of publishing, of anything of that sort. I'd actually like to go back to the earlier point you were making about visibility, and why we feel that enough people aren't reading right now is because it's not just visibility, it's also access. I think, so there has to be some sort of institutional support that facilitates reading. So we don't have enough libraries. I mean, how many people actually have access to the books being published on a regular basis? So if you think about the books being read, I think it'll only be like a minuscule amount, because by and large, who has the luxury to buy book after book after book? It's just not possible. We all became readers because we had access to books through libraries. We weren't buying every book that was coming out, right? And which is why even on social media now, like, it's almost become like a trend just to say TLDR, because no one's going to read the whole thing, because you anyway don't have access to it. So someone else has told you a summary of this, so you think, okay, that's the book, and we aren't inculcating the habit of reading, and I think that's an issue that needs to be addressed.
And do you think that is part of that conversation on too many things have our attention now, or do you think a big part of it could probably get sorted with the support that we're talking about? Because libraries are essentially something that require the kind of push and support that, say, a government or a public funding can provide, as opposed to private individuals trying to make that happen. So do you think that's
Absolutely, yes. I think it really boils down to institutional support for this, because only then can it be widespread enough. Otherwise, it'll just be like hits and misses, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I think, when we're talking about, like you said, government support and the push towards reading, I think one of the things that I'd like all of you to maybe comment on is the fact that reading might be essential and we don't look at it like that. The book world stays a book world. So you go to festivals, especially in the English language, publishing industry. If you go to festivals, you'll see the same people there. You'll see similar kind of conversations happening, and the world kind of almost becomes a closed world. And what's happening outside it is the need to be plugged into what's happening outside the book world is important, right? And if we could talk about, just since all of you are part of that space, how do you think we can communicate the idea of books and reading being an essential thing to do? Yeah.
Thanks for that question, Swati. In fact, when you were talking about how do we make new readers, I think for me it's two simple things. One is start them early, and for that you need all of the things that we've all spoken about, wide institutional support. And the other is, there's this independent publishing house in Chennai called Bluffed. And I still have this little sticker that they gave me a long time ago, which is reading is sexy. And I think for the young, it's also the quality of books that we're putting out there. And I think, Naveen, like with what you've done with Seagull Books, for anyone who's a book lover in India or anywhere else, like coming to your bookstore is like, it's something which is such a privilege. And like you really feel like, okay, you're a real reader if you've gone to Seagull Books. And we have that kind of bookshop actually in the north, one bookshop in the northeast, Rachna bookshop in Gangtok. And it's like, it is a sexy thing, to be posting a photo that you've been to Rachna bookshops. And I've spent a lot of time at Rachna bookshops. So this summer I spent a month there. And in fact, I was just like looking at the dedication of Raman, because a lot of people come and they're spending hours and they're reading, and then they don't necessarily buy a book. But there was this young boy, 11 years old, and for 3 days he came and read this one book from this shelf. And on the third day he came to buy it. It was worth, I think, a little over 1,200 rupees. That was an expensive book to buy. And for me it was like, Melkior, when you're saying people don't go to bookshops, like there was this one bookshop in Police Bazaar when I was growing up, and I still remember seeing Arundhati Roy's book there. I was 15, very poor, didn't have any pocket money, and I saved, like I was actually doing like part-time work, and I saved for 6 months till I got that book. So I feel if the bookshops are there, people will buy. And for those of us, and if there are good books as well, that I think if you give a child a bad book, they'll read it once and they're not going to get more curious. So to do this about how do we continue, so yesterday we had this session with Rohan Chakravarti, who's using the medium of the comic to actually, like, I'm still like so excited and inspired by Rohan's session yesterday, because I think in that 1 hour of what he did with us, like this, Ruddy, it was a little quiz time, environmental quiz time. I learned so much about animals and nature and scientific facts that it got me really curious, and I think there were quite a lot of children here. And then the next question to him was, how do we take it into schools? And in fact, today our tourism director was here. And we were just talking about it, and he's saying, yes, we should take it to schools and let's bring him in. So that's how it starts, because actually it's not disconnected. It shouldn't happen in a bubble. Because actually reading, I mean, for all of us, I'm sure we're so passionate, and we know, like I know, that first book that I read when I was 5 years old, which was The Ugly Duckling, it changed my life. Like really, I felt like, okay. And it was The Ugly Duckling that I read, and I've never stopped reading since. And so, of course, questions of access, institutional support, all of it. But for all of us, I think here our whole point is to spread it, like to, how do we look at in our different ways to spread this need. It's a necessity to read.
Yeah, in fact, maybe it's niche because what Amber said about accessibility. If there was accessibility that was growing in the book market, then maybe the people who had the potential of becoming a reader, the younger kids who, if they were exposed to reading early on, would probably become readers. But one of the things that this the session's also called writing, marketing, and market and platform, right? We've talked about readers, but I think the one thing that we can all agree on is writers are growing. People who want to tell stories are growing. Everyone wants to write a book. Everyone wants to publish a book. Everyone wants to tell their story. And I think that probably comes from the fact that the medium of telling stories are so many now. I mean, you can tell your story via book, via a social media platform, via documentaries, OTT. There's so many ways of telling your story, and writing is one of them. So can we talk a little bit about the writer today, of what maybe Amber, you can talk about. And actually, the other thing that I want to talk about is, both Amber and Sangma, if you could just talk about the writers you get in your magazine. Who are the writers? Have they changed? Because especially for you, I think, the idea of running a Garo, a magazine which is very specific in the language, etc. What kind of writers are you seeing today, and have they evolved over time? Are you getting a very different, from the last time you ran the magazine to now, what has changed? And Amber, later maybe you could comment on, yeah.
So, so we started with the twin objective I've told you, with boosting the reading culture and giving platform to the writers. First, we gave a platform to the writers. Some of the writers have become really writers, not just they did not end in our magazine. Some of them have produced their own books, published their own books. Some have even started their own small magazines like this. Now, many people, they want platform to write. We give them platform, but it doesn't mean now. I'm saying about nowadays, not before. Nowadays, we give them a chance to write in our magazine, but before that, there is social media platforms. We check them, what they write in our social media platforms. We will make them practice there, because they can delete, they can write, they can do whatever. Because in printed books, once you get it printed, it is there forever. You can never erase it. So we make them practice. So we actually cultivate the writers. We inspire them. We make them write, and we help them. We make them write, and we see what they are writing, and we suggest them. It is like this, because some of them, it is like this. Some of them are very creative, but not good at putting the sentences clearly. They need editors like this. No, so in our magazine, we look for writers. Actually, we approach them. Some of them approach them, but we help them to become good writers by checking their writings. It is like that.
Interesting. It's sort of like beginning with you, and then maybe, like you said, going on to become a book writer or a writer or someone who starts a magazine. So you're essentially creating a line of readers and writers by cultivating.
Yes. Because our ultimate success is not getting money from writing magazines, but producing some writers.
Yeah, yeah.
Because our magazine, it depends on selling the magazine without any advertisement. It is more like selling vegetables. We sell the magazines, we get the money, we brought the money, and with it money.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy. Amber, could you talk a little bit about that same thing? I think in a way you're also cultivating writers.
I mean, one hopes one is doing that. From what I can tell, in terms of all the submissions we get as agents, there is definitely like a strong appetite to write, to tell stories and different kinds of stories also. But what I find is that sometimes you can tell that like many of the stories seem to be derivative. Like I feel it's a problem of people aren't reading enough, so hence the ability to write and express yourself in writing tends to be derivative from something you've recently read as trendy, or something of that. And I think this boils down to people aren't reading enough, and that really is a problem, I feel. Whenever in my head, I think I'm still an editor more than an agent, and it's my editorial instinct that guides me in terms of who we decide to take on or not. And I look largely at fiction. I have a colleague who looks at non-fiction, and I think it's important, like whenever we get down to like, okay, there definitely seems to be something over here. We have a discussion with the writer in question. Are they open to feedback? And I feel that in many cases they're not, which is also surprising, because it's like, my job as an agent also is to help you make this into the best version of itself, because I am a conduit between you and the publishing house. And in terms of like, I have a sense of what might work better, what works well, and that's what I try to do. That's what I like to do. So I think in terms of, people are writing all sorts of things right now, and that's great. There is like, the appetite is there, but I think it's noticeable that like that there isn't enough reading happening.
In fact, that's interesting, right? There's an appetite to tell your story, but there's maybe not that much of an appetite to consume someone else's story. And that's an interesting, sort of dichotomy, because we automatically assume that a writer would read, or a writer or a reader would probably maybe want to tell their story if they have that in them. But the fact that we have entire generations or entire crops of writers who are not reading, that's an interesting. Why do you think it'll be interesting to kind of talk about a little bit about why that is there, what has changed in our in our DNA, in us, because there was a time when writers and readers were sort of interchangeable. More and more now we have people who are probably telling their story but not reading other people's stories. Why do you think that is? Would any of you want to know?
Yeah, I think it's the market being flooded with the produce. Okay, anything that is in excess of demand needs to be rejected. Now with the social media, the internet and everything, everybody has access. Like they say, everybody has a story to tell. Probably one, and good writers might have 10 or 100 or 1,000, but everybody has a story, his story or her story. And now that everybody has a chance to put it on the net. Okay, now you have a plethora of choice in various media. I myself get about 13 plus magazines and short stories being published separately, not because I'm a publisher, because I'm a friend. Okay, so I get 13, and each of these 13 magazines have 30 short stories and articles and anything from Dostoevsky to the local painter, everybody, comparisons and all that stuff. Now you're being flooded with this. How do you make a choice? Your life is limited, okay? And you're going to make a wise choice in choosing between all this. That is the difficulty. On one hand, bringing out good writers. A good writer writes good content. A good writer knows what has been written in his own language earlier, and the rest of the literary world, right? So you think something is really new because you got up one night and got this idea. You need to fact check and see that if somebody else has said it better or more, in a more mature way. So all this plays an effect on what one gets to read and what one gets to see. On the one hand, you have a dearth of good writers. On the other hand, you have voluminous writings that are available from which to sift through. I rely on friends who are reliable friends before I pick up a story and read, not as a publisher, but just as a reader. But the other side of it is the very own media, the internet has actually taken the stories and the authors to places. For example, I'm going to go back to Jaymohan again. Jaymohan has a site called jaymohan.in. It is, the regular hits are anywhere between 25,000 to 30,000 a day. Okay, on serious days, when he writes something controversial and non-fiction, it goes up to 1 lakh. Okay, on cinema, 1 lakh. Or a new novel comes, 75,000. So these are the hits. Much of the work that I publish now has already come out as a serial or on a daily basis in his website. For example, there's 26 books of Mahabharata retold by Jaymohan. Every single day he published it on his website. Okay, for close to 7 years. Without a break. Without a break in between books, but once a book starts, there is no break. He's written it in airports, he's written in railway stations, he's written when 10 of us were gossiping here, but that was there. So, a huge readership. After that, it got published by a firm, I mean, parts of it, 4, 5, like that. Now we published the first 7. When we went to the 8th, 3 of them went out of print. We sold, completely sold. Then we went to the last 5, 4 of them are sold. Now we are making a mega project which might cost anywhere between 45 lakhs to 50 lakhs just to bring out those 26 copies on board. So this is the dichotomy that you're talking about. On one hand, plethora of choice, on the other hand, quality of writing. The same media works far and against. It's a double-edged sword.
In fact, the fact that he's getting... Mary, please.
I just want to mention that actually we have Mr. J. Mohan here, and we will have a session tomorrow with him. Right? Yeah. And also that, I'm a huge fan because the books of his writings has just got translated as of last year from Tamil to English. So, yeah, all of you who are listening, you must come to a session tomorrow.
So we have about 10 minutes left, I think. Yeah, and I would like to see if there are any questions in the audience. I've got a couple more for the panelists, but I'd like to first open it up to the audience and see if there's any of you who'd like to kind of ask them questions. Wonderful. So we've got 2 questions here. If we can. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this extremely thoughtful conversation. I have a slightly unusual question for Naveen, Kishore. So sorry for my throat. So Seagull recently launched a series of cups with characters from K.G. Subramanian's cartoons. And that's quite interesting because K.G. Subramanian himself was sort of interested in playful circulation. But I'm very curious sort of how you position that within Seagull's sort of publishing work as a whole, and do you have some, complex feelings about merchandise that are beyond sort of the books that you publish, and maybe if any of the panelists have anything to say about that.
I have to disappoint you. I have a very boring answer, which is that KGS or Manida, we handle his estate, and he was a dear friend, father figure. He turns 100 next year. And the last time we did merchandising seriously was when he turned 75. When we turned our whole building into like an art museum, packed away all our books, everything, and turned into a gallery, and we had this glorious thing. The garage became like a art museum store. So everything from T-shirts and cups and drawing notebooks and you name it, calendars and stuff. The cups remained over all these years, and every now and then people would ask, so we would reissue them. They're not seen as great money-making things. They're not calculated as unit cost like the books and priced at a certain thing. Now we're doing again a whole bunch of merchandise around and publishing about 40 of his books, some redone or some reinvented in different ways. For example, if you have a big book of 800 pages, we're issuing them as 12 paperbacks as thematic essays, that kind of thing that's important. So the cups, I'm afraid, are not really seen as a money earner so much as a celebration of his art.
Yeah, hi. Since you guys were talking about creating new readers and connecting with readers, I was just wondering how important is diversity within publishing houses and maybe even literary agencies in order to do that? Because I know, for example, a lot of big mainstream publishing houses in Delhi, at least, a lot of people in charge are from similar communities. A lot of them are upper caste, they are upper class, and I was just wondering, like, how important is diversity in order to create new kinds of readers? Like, any of you can take that question.
I would love to answer that. Because, I've, over the years, going to, for example, big literary festivals, which all of us know, which is inspiring for us. But everywhere I go, the rest of India, there is always this notion of a Northeast panel. And what does it even mean? That we have a Northeast panel, like writings from everywhere. We don't have a North panel, a South panel, so why should we have a Northeast panel? So every time I'm asked to curate one, I'm saying, invite me as part of your advisory. So I make sure that there is inclusion, just like one has women in your board, so you know that there's gender inclusion to a certain extent. I would do that also for Northeast, and many times people have laughed at me and just gone to somebody else who does the Northeast panel. But I find that really, like for the Northeast at least, for our region, I find that that is really problematic. So that's one part of diversity. I think definitely over the years we've been talking about, upper class or class or caste representation in the places which are the the gatekeepers. I'm one of them, I guess, for the region. To a certain extent, because I've been in Delhi in the publishing industry for a while, and we all become gatekeepers. And it is something that I think that it's only the last, maybe, post Adivasi Lives Matter movement that we are also getting more aware of this. And when we are looking at, talking about access, like this place, I mean, for me, a point of, like, as a person who really, really loves books, Seagull Books, the bookstore is as inspiring as I love the Chennai Book Fair. I love it so much, I cannot tell you. And then I love going into the community library project in Delhi, and I tell everyone that if you don't think that people are reading, go to any one of these different, and they're all very different spaces, right? Because community library runs in slums. In Delhi, and you go on a hot summer afternoon in Delhi, and it is 200-300 children reading, it is just so beautiful. The Chennai Book Fair, when I first went to it about 10-12 years ago, it's like 2,000 plus Tamil publishers, and like my auto driver in Chennai was like asking me where you're going. I said, to the book fair. I was like, acha, and he started sprouting like Tamil poetry to me, and that is magic. And so all of that is possible, and I wish that, I think for us, we're alive with stories in this region. We don't have, and which is why it's important for me to also have this, because we don't have a publishing infrastructure. So to begin with, like even, you just recently printed a book. You've brought in a book and you printed it in Delhi, right? So there was like another book, which both the books we launched yesterday, and interestingly, both the books which I love about it is that your book was in English and Mizo, and the children's book that we launched yesterday was literally like 1 page English, 1 page Khasi. And I think we are all finding new ways to do this. And I forget what the question is, but it was about access and inclusion. And it's something I'm really passionate about, because I feel we've been waiting so long. So I'm very happy to have all of you as well from the outside and from this state and other parts of this region to be part of this Lit Fest, because we are saying you come to us and be wowed by us. So that's my ambition for this Lit Fest too.
I'm going to get a word side in. Okay. This was the same question that we were having, whether it's art, drama, culture, literature, it's the same group of people, in various cities. It's like, you put up a mole here, then you become somebody different. And like a Tamil movie, this has been a problem, right? But this can change. This can change with effort. Like Naveen said, more voices have to be heard, more literature has to be brought into the broader fold. That's one. What we do at our festival in Coimbatore is exactly what Mary says. We don't create a Northeast forum, but for the past 4 years, we brought writers from Northeast to come and speak there. Okay. Last year, Kanishka and Mary came and spoke about publishing, so that our guys know what publishing is, the larger sense. Then there was Janvi Barwa, there was Janice Pariyat, there was Anita Agnihotri, and there was Mamang Dai. Okay. And our sessions are 1 hour solid sessions, 300, 400 people. All of them read. We translate their works into Tamil. Then they ask questions. It's not a 5-minute, hi, bye, your book is love. No. We are serious. So that's one way of actually getting in, breaking that mold of, that crux of people dominating the entire thing.
I think, if I understood correctly, you're talking of diversity within the publishing house. You're talking in terms of staffing choices, who you hire, etc., etc. I think these are issues that are being considered. There are publishing houses, certainly in Delhi, even people like Zuban, who consciously put out an advertisement, etc. We've kind of intuitively not seen it as a flag either way. We focused on the diversity of content, again intuitively and accidentally, right? There have been occasions when somebody walks in through the door who would be politically and diversity a wonderful person to employ, but may not have a single book idea in them. Or the opposite, they would start a whole series of books because they happened to walk in and you were open. And there were no bureaucracies or no barricades in between. But this is such an individual, subjective choice. Some people in the old days, when we used to have funding agencies in this country who were allowed to function and do projects like the Ford Foundation, they would actually have a diversity statement. And I remember when we first got funding from the Norwegians for our publishing school, they wanted to know if I had considered toilets for women. I mean, all kinds of strange questions like that. And we had to calm down and actually write to them and said, if you look at our history by then of 20 years, it was so strongly diverse by accident. There were more women than men. There were different communities. There was all kinds of stuff happening, different sexual persuasions, all kinds of... And it happened as a kind... We were lucky. It happened in its own organic, natural sort of way. But it is consciously looked at. It is a flag now from a different way. You have an antenna not to do the wrong thing, just because you think you know best from your experience.
I think we have to wrap up. Yeah, I've got yeah.
Sorry.
We have 30 seconds, yes. Do we have 30 seconds? I think Ambar has a closing remark to make. It's just something to think about, I guess, before we close.
I mean, just to add to what the others have also been saying, I think definitely there's no question that diversity will enrich the experience in publishing, and even in terms of the output that like the books we produce. But I think one of the stumbling blocks in the publishing industry, at least in the English language publishing industry, to diversity, and I'm talking about diversity across like class and everything, is the fact that publishing salaries have been uniformly low for so long. So in my experience, only people belonging to a certain kind of privilege can sustain themselves in publishing, especially when they're starting out. Because I mean, just the rents in Delhi versus the salary you're earning, it's
Absolutely. I mean, if you're talking about that. But yeah, I think...
I have one last comment to make on this.
So I think we can let
I think from a curatorial perspective, diversity and inclusion, what I've learned over my years of curating various things is that we can only always try to do better, because in a country like ours, it is a never-ending journey to include and and to see the range of diversity, So it's like, I will never be perfect at including, but all of us must try, Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone. Of course, the panelists are here for you to talk more to later on after the session. I am offering your services myself, but thank you so much for being such a great audience, and thank you everyone for this conversation. It was wonderful.